Hi, I am Ashley Howell. I'm the Regional Executive Director for Brighton Hospice and also the Corporate Compliance Officer. I'm going to talk to you about a couple things, just Cliff Notes version of the employee handbook that you receive through Paycom. Just highlight some areas that CMS wants us to review with you, and then just some important things as well. We'll start with page 32 of the handbook, which is the scope of services. So as you know, at Brighton Hospice, we care for patients that have a terminal prognosis of less than 6 months. We have a variety of people on the hospice team, first of which is a physician. So every location has a medical director that directs all of the clinical care that the hospice provides. Every time a patient comes on service, they can also elect to continue to receive care from their attending physician, and this is done through the election statement. And then we work with our medical director and the attending physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant to direct that care. We also have nurses and an RN case manager for every patient. Typically, nursing services see the patient twice a week. Obviously, depending on patient need, that could increase or decrease. We also have LPNs that provide support services to the RNs and continue with the plan of care. Every location has a set of physical, speech, and occupational therapists that we contract with to help the patient with range of motion activities, swallowing, activities of daily living, things like that. We also have a social worker that is part of every patient's case that helps with funeral planning, grief support, things like that. We also have dietitians at some locations. Mostly the locations we use are RNs to provide nutritional services, but if we do need to ask for an increase in nutritional services, we can have dietitians see patients. We also have our amazing hospice CNAs and aides that see our patients. Typically, they see them anywhere between 2 to 5 times a week, just depending on the patient need. And they really are the ones that have the eyes and the ears out and see our patients the most often. We also provide chaplain services and spiritual counseling. Typically, those they see patients about 1 to 2 times a month, but again, can increase and decrease depending on patient needs. We also have amazing volunteers that provide volunteer services to our patients or within the office. We're required by Medicare to have 5% of our patient care hours be volunteer services, and we're always looking for volunteers. So if anyone knows someone that wants to kind of go and hang out with our amazing patients, please feel free to send them our way because we're always looking for great volunteers. We also are required to provide bereavement services for our family members for up to 13 months following a patient's death. We do this with phone calls, letters, and we have a bereavement coordinator at each location that heads that up to make sure that the family members are getting that support after their loved one dies. We also contract with pharmacies and durable medical equipment companies, so they're an extension of Brighton Hospice. Most pharmaceuticals, medications, or drugs are covered under the hospice benefit as well as DME. And every location has a different pharmacy and DME supplier. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our standard office hours are from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, but we always have an RN on call after that. One of our core values at Brighton Hospice is to make sure that as an organization, we respect patient, client, or caregiver's unique cultural beliefs. We get to care for a myriad of different types of people, and we want to make sure that our staff is always sensitive and figuring out the best way to care for different cultures. Different cultural diversity includes race, ethnicity, language, religions, values and belief systems, disabilities, economic class, sexuality or sexual orientation, gender, age, and educational background. We do not discriminate against any of these when we bring patients on services as well as employees, and we want to make sure that our employees are comfortable caring for patients. If there's ever someone that you don't feel like you can care for due to different cultural beliefs, please feel free to address this with your leader, and we will make the appropriate changes. One of the biggest areas that we can have cultural competency is using the patient's primary language. Each location has a contract with an interpreter service, so be sure that you understand how to contact them if the need for an interpreter arises. We can also use family members of patients, but they can never be anyone under the age of 18 due to the fact that we will be discussing private health information, and they are not covered under HIPAA. And it also always has to be the patient choice. We can't just go grab someone down the hallway because we know they speak Spanish. The patient would have to let us know that they would be comfortable with them interpreting for them. Brighton Hospice focuses on compliance and making sure that we're always doing everything we need to in order to be compliant with state, federal, and local regulations. Brighton Hospice has developed a corporate compliance program, and I am the corporate compliance officer. We investigate any possibilities of non-compliance within the agency and take this very seriously. Please feel free to reach out to me if you ever feel like there's a compliance issue. I can be reached at the home team number, as well as my cell phone that's listed, or via email and Tiger Text at any time. There's no retaliation for whistleblowing. We want to make sure that we are maintaining compliance in all aspects of our business. This also includes contractors that we work with. So if you ever feel like possibly hospital or pharmacy or DME are not doing things appropriately, please feel free to reach out to me and these will be investigated. Brighton Hospice has created an ethics policy to establish a culture of openness, trust, and integrity in the business practices. We want to make sure that we're always doing everything as ethical as possible, and a lot of stuff can arise with patients and families, especially with end-of-life decisions. So if there is ever an ethical issue that we need to address, we're required to form an ethics committee. This typically consists of the medical director, administrator, director of clinical services, RN case manager, anyone else within the interdisciplinary group that cares for the patient. Can also include the patient's representative or the patient's attending physician. A lot of the times it's dealing with end-of-life issues and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatments. We've had a couple recently in regards to pacemakers, where we talked about, turning those off, things like that. So as administrators or just as general staff, if you feel like there's a possible ethical concern, please bring that to your administrator, and we will get together and talk about making sure that we can do everything we can to meet the patients' and families' needs, as well as maintain an ethical program. Advanced directives are very important when people come on hospice to determine what they want done in regards to life-sustaining medical treatment. Every state has a little bit of a different practice when it comes to advanced directives, but most states still have at least 3 types of advanced directives. The first one is a living will, in which the patient has decided while they were still of sound mind what they want to have done in regards to life-sustaining medical treatment. The second one is a medical power of attorney, in which the patient has decided to designate someone to make those decisions for them in the event they're no longer able to make those. And it's very important that you know that they're a medical power of attorney, not a financial power of attorney. It can be the same person, but they're 2 very different documents. And power of attorney doesn't designate which type it is. So we always want to make sure that it's either a healthcare power of attorney or a medical power of attorney to decide that they're the correct person to make the decisions on behalf of the patient. There's also a form called a POLST form or a MOST form, a life with dignity order. There's all sorts of different names for it depending on what state you're in. It's a 1-page front and back document that is typically only used for patients that have a terminal prognosis. Every single admission packet has one in it, and our social workers are well versed on helping families fill those out. A lot of patients come with them when they come on service with us, so we get copies of it, but they can also be updated at any time. So be aware of those forms. They're typically posted in patients' houses or apartments on their front door, on the back of their front door, so EMS can easily identify what the patient wants done in regards to life-sustaining treatment. Brighton Hospice takes complaints very seriously. We monitor and track and document every complaint that we receive. It's going to happen. We deal with very sensitive issues. No agency goes without complaints. So be aware of your complaint process, how best to make sure that that information gets recorded. When the state comes in for a survey, that's one of the areas that they always look at is our complaint log to make sure that A, we have complaints, because what program doesn't, right? If you don't, then you're obviously not logging them. And B, that if they're coming in on a complaint survey, that we have documentation as to what we did and followed up on that. So we take complaints very seriously. We always follow up on them. I think that's one of the things that Brighton does really well is that we address them quickly and making sure that everyone involved in the complaint is heard and that their needs are met and that we resolve them either through education with the staff, education with the family, facility, anything like that. But like I said, make sure that you are aware of a possible complaint that might arise. You guys are the eyes and the ears out seeing patients. So if you feel like a family member might be upset about something, bring that to your leader's attention. because a lot of the times a quick call to them to kind of address it at the moment is the best way to do that, rather than them getting more upset and calling the state and then survey coming out. So we want to address complaints as quickly as possible. The way that patients can address complaints is to call the office and speak with the administrator. They can write the site as well. They can also contact the State Department of Health. They can contact their Medicare QIO, depending on what state you live in. They're all different. And they can also, if you're a CHAP accredited agency, they can contact CHAP to file a complaint. Medicare requires that we have a Quality Assurance Performance Improvement Program, which is also referred to as QAPI. It's one of those super weird acronyms that we have in hospice. But we track and trend a lot of data: infections, falls, wounds, anything to do with patient care, but it can also be our onboarding process or our iPad tracking. We're always looking at ways to improve the agency, and that's what QAPI is there for. So we ask that you're always willing to participate in these quality improvement programs so that we're able to increase our care that we provide to our patients or to our employees. And so we might ask you to use a new tool or to track and trend, that we're doing education constantly on the best way to fill out forms so that we have a good quality program. And so we just ask that you're willing to participate, and that also when we have our meeting, that you voice possible areas for your particular discipline that might be able to help improve our agency as well. Unfortunately, no matter how good a care we give at Brighton Hospice, we're only as good as our medical record as far as CMS is concerned. So documentation is very important in every aspect within the organization. We want timely and accurate documentation, and we would prefer that our documentation is done bedside or right after you leave the patient's home, or within 24 hours. So we always need to have an updated medical record. State survey or auditors at any time could come in, and we never want to be more than a day behind, basically. So maintaining quick charting that's accurate and day of is going to be the best way to make sure that your care is accurately reflected within the medical record. One of the ways that we maintain a good compliant program is through a lot of auditing. All prepayment audits are done. We do them clinical and technical audits. So if you ever hear from a staff member asking you about a clinical or technical audit situation, please address those as timely as possible so that we can get billing out, or so that we have the most accurate medical record. We have meetings throughout the year. We typically do staff meetings about every quarter, as well as our IDT or IDG meetings about every 2 weeks. If you are part of an IDG, you must attend those meetings, as well as if you're a staff member, which is everyone I'm talking to, you must attend the staff meetings as well. We do look at that attendance when we do our annual performance evaluations, and that helps determine whether or not you would be eligible for a raise. Definitely during this time that we're in right now, the meetings are a little bit different. They're typically via Teams or Zoom or outside, nice socially distanced. So we're not doing quite as robust of meetings as we had been in the past, but we definitely still, they're just as important. We always talk about good information, and we always want to make sure that you guys are attending and participating in those types of meetings. We also have other meetings throughout the year, educational events, things like that. We also have our Relias training program that is in lieu of a lot of the really boring staff meetings that we used to do. So we're required by Medicare to provide certain educations annually, and those are all done through the Relias program. So keeping on top of that and making sure you're getting those done just helps us, again, with survey, maintaining a compliant program, and making Medicare happy. The next section goes over the Patient Bill of Rights. I ask that you review that, especially if you are an admission discipline, so an RN, social worker, chaplain, because you will go over those rights with your patient and caregiver on admission, and then everyone should just be aware of them so that they know what patients have the rights to. It's very important that we know and respect the patient rights and make sure that we address them appropriately. Every state has a little bit of a different version of patients' rights because, again, states determine if they're more strict. We always have to go with the state laws, so make sure that you're aware of your state-specific patient rights, and those would all be part of the admission handbook. One of the biggest rights hospice patients have is to be free of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Unfortunately, elderly patients are often victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and so we really need to be the advocates for our patients and making sure that they're being well taken care of. you guys are the eyes and ears that get to see patients most often, and making sure that we're really addressing possible concerns that we have with patients and family members, or even facilities. Honestly, we probably have to address facility abuse most often, unfortunately. Some possible signs of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Physical abuse would be bruises and irregular patterns or unusual locations. A lot of grabbing on the arms, fingerprints on the arms, things like that. Just really injuries of unknown origin are a good sign of abuse. Neglect is often viewed as dehydration, malnutrition, poor hygiene. Emotional abuse and neglect, if people are afraid of strangers or have paranoia, or even if they grasp onto you or really want you to be around, that's another sign. Or it's a hunger for attention is what I was getting to there. Unfortunately, financial abuse and neglect and exploitation is probably the most common type that we see, and often kind of hard to pinpoint. But if families are, utilizing patient funds inappropriately or not allowing patients to have Social Security money, things like that, those are areas that we definitely need to address. Please bring that to your leader's attention, unless obviously the leader is one of the issues. And just don't hesitate to make those reports. We call APS often, depending on what state. The reporting requirements are a little bit different, but always reach out to your leader and make sure that we're doing all of the reporting that we need to make sure that patients are safe. And one of the hardest things is sometimes patients might have been living this way for several years and we're the first ones to go into the home. And just because they have been like that doesn't mean that it's okay. So we want to make sure that if patients are living in terrible conditions, or even not even terrible, but not great conditions, that we're reporting that to the appropriate state agencies so they can get involved. We're required by the government to notify them if we feel like any medical devices have caused serious illness, injury, or death to a patient. If you feel like a medical device has caused serious illness or injury or death, please report that to your immediate leader, and we will help you fill out the MedWatch form, and we are required to fill that out within 10 business days. Hand hygiene. We all are so, this used to be something I would skip over, but obviously not anymore. We want to make sure that we're using proper hand hygiene at all instances. If your hands are visibly soiled, you want to make sure that you're washing them with warm water and soap for at least the full happy birthday song. You can choose your own song, just sing a song in your head, but making sure that you're really scrubbing those and getting your hands as clean as possible. Obviously, alcohol-based hand sanitizers are what everyone's using now. Make sure that you're using those often. You always want to decontaminate your hands upon reporting for work, before gloving, after glove removal, before and after each patient contact, after handling contaminated objects, before handling medication, before eating, after using the restroom, and when leaving the facility. There's proper donning and doffing with hand hygiene as well, and as part of your orientation, we will review the proper donning and doffing of PPE and when to do hand hygiene during that process. Infection control has always been very important in the healthcare industry as well as hospice, but now it's taken a front seat in pretty much everything that we do with the current public health emergency and the coronavirus. We want you to know that we are always looking for ways we can continue to receive PPE to make sure that you are protected, and utilizing the PPE per Brighton policies is the best way to protect yourself from possibly being exposed to the coronavirus. It is your barrier between you and a positive patient, or a possible positive patient, or someone that we might not even know has it. And so we ask that you always follow proper donning and doffing of the personal protective equipment and any policies, and it's an ever-changing environment. So please always be aware of the most recent policy that we have in place to protect you from the current coronavirus outbreak. We also have to talk about TB. Most of our locations are very low risk for TB. We do an annual risk assessment at every location. Upon hire, you will be asked to present either a test or receive a test or chest x-ray. And then after that, we will check you for signs and symptoms annually. Typically, this is done through our PAYCOM program, and it would be around your hire date when we would ask you to fill out that signs and symptoms questionnaire. The next couple pages of your employee handbook are universal precautions for any type of pathogen that you could come in contact with. So please feel free to read that over, or actually I encourage you to read that over. We also provide training through our Relias program that I talked about earlier in regards to universal precautions and protecting you from possible exposures at work. Incidents and accidents happen all the time within the hospice world, and so we want to make sure that we are always reporting these. There is an incident reporting form on the Devero software program. There's also an infection reporting form, so be aware of those and making sure that you're filling those out. Again, like I talked about earlier, we utilize this data to make a lot of our performance improvement projects, and so we always want to make sure that if we have any type of incident, a near miss of a fall, a witnessed fall, missing dentures, really anything, an automobile accident, any type of infection that, or any type of incident that is something besides just your regular standard day, please make sure you're filling out an incident report so that those are recorded correctly. When state survey comes in, they will always want to see our incident and infection reports. And again, there's no hospice agency in the world that goes without them, so we want to make sure that we're properly documenting, and that way we're getting good data to make decisions on how we can improve our agency. The next couple pages are general patient safety information. A lot of this is also in the admission handbook that we give patients to make sure that they have a good, safe environment and that our employees have a good, safe environment to care for the patient. One of the biggest safety issues that we come up with is oxygen. A lot of our patients either have been on oxygen for a long time and might be a little complacent with it. There's some patients that are getting oxygen for the very first time when they come on hospice, and it is a big safety issue. We want to make sure that people are always using oxygen safety precautions. Our DME suppliers should also be setting up information for the caregivers so that they know how to use it safely, no open flames, no smoking, things like that, but just make sure that you read over and are aware of how to best have oxygen be safe in the home. There's a couple of good numbers in your employee handbook as well, as far as emergency numbers to utilize in the event of an emergency or to contact Adult Protective Services, things like that. So make sure that you keep those numbers on file in your handbook handy, just in case you ever need to call any of those numbers. Along the same lines, emergency preparedness. So I actually am redoing this video because last video I said if there's ever an emergency that every single site has to deal with, like, I don't know what we're gonna do, but we're living that right now. So every single site is dealing with the current coronavirus. It's not an emergency in the respect of a hurricane or an earthquake or things like that. It's a little bit more of kind of a slow-moving emergency, but it's definitely made us check our emergency plan and make sure that we have protocols in place. We've had wildfires, we've had earthquakes, we've had hurricanes, we've had all of that happen this year, and really making sure that our employees and our patients are safe have been our #1 priority since the very beginning of the possibility of COVID turning into what it has today. So know that we're constantly looking for guidance on our emergency preparedness plan and updating it appropriately. You will receive training in regards to emergency preparedness through our Relias program, as well as ongoing educations, especially as the current public health emergency unfolds. We are constantly giving you guys information, changing testing, changing quarantine protocols, things like that. So make sure that you're always aware of the newest policies when it comes to emergency preparedness. And just know that we're staying on top of that and getting the information out to you as quickly as possible so that we can continue to care for our patients and keeping you guys safe. We have disaster codes for every patient, so that was kind of the big buzzword for a while, is making sure that we know which patients we need to get to as quickly as possible, and that is still important, especially if we have a staffing shortage. We need to know what patients absolutely have to get seen, and so there's code 1, 2, or 3. Code 1s are patients that do need to get seen ASAP. They're typically oxygen dependent, they have wounds, and also if they're completely homebound and might require evacuation in the event of a natural disaster. Those are our code 1 patients. Code 2 patients can typically wait about 48 hours to receive a standard visit. And then we have code 3 that can wait up to 72 hours. So we want to make sure that we are coding patients properly. Most patients that are in facilities are typically code 3 because they also have the facility staff that can care for them. But just be aware code 1, 2, and 3 and the severity of the patients, and it can change. So if a patient goes from a facility to the daughter's home and maybe the daughter isn't there as often, they're not going to be a code 3 anymore. They could probably increase to a code 2. So in the event of an emergency, besides the one we're all living in, the administrators are the ones responsible to decide that an emergency could possibly take place or has taken place, and they will form the incident command center where we will determine how best to address the emergency. Every location has specific policies for what type of emergencies might happen in their site. So obviously, like in Minnesota, a really cold winter storm, whereas in Oregon, wildfires would be our biggest emergency, and in Utah, we have earthquakes. So every location is a little bit different. We do a hazard vulnerability analysis every year as well to determine if we have new hazards, if we move offices and we're close to a power plant or close to a dam, things like that. We're always addressing our policy and updating it as needed. We will, like I said, we'll train you annually. We address it annually, our policy, and then we also have to perform drills. Right now, during the public health emergency, we're living in emergency, so we actually don't have to perform any of our drills, but once this is all over, we will be performing drills annually, and we just ask that you participate in those and provide us with feedback after the drills so that we can update and maintain the best disaster preparedness program that we can possibly have. Obviously, fires within the workplace are a concern as well, especially if you're in a facility. We ask that you're always available to help out a facility in the event of a fire due to them having kitchens, things like that. But also in our workplace, we could have fires. So we always want you to be aware of where fire extinguishers are and the exit plan for your building. RACE and PASS is kind of the buzzwords when it comes to fire safety. RACE is rescue those in danger, activate the alarm, contain the fire, extinguish the fire. And PASS is how you extinguish the fire. You push the pin, aim the nozzle, squeeze the handle, and sweep the base. I know that was a lot of information. We always are open to possible employee suggestions when it comes to anything within our agency: policies, procedures, protocols, patient care, onboarding, everything. So please feel free to let us know if you feel like there's areas that we can improve on within our organization. And I really appreciate you taking the time. That was a lot of information, but know you can always reference your handbook. HR is always a reference, your leaders are references, and I'm always a reference and available to you at any time as well. So again, thank you for watching, and welcome to the Brighton team.
Hi team, my name is Erica Stoneman, the Vice President of Human Resources. I have the privilege of leading Brighton's HR initiatives to support success at Brighton. You are about to begin training to ensure you are provided the tools necessary to deliver Brighton's mission and to excel within your role. Throughout your training, you will learn about Brighton's unique culture and how we are setting the bar for hospice care. To keep our culture thriving, we have a team member handbook that outlines Brighton's expectations. These guidelines ensure that we follow federal, state, and local employment law, but more importantly, provides best practice to ensure efficient and effective operations and fairness and safety for team members. We will review a few highlights of our handbook, but it is your responsibility to read, understand, and comply with all requirements. These guidelines are not intended to address every situation that may arise. We trust you to be professional, ethical, and use good judgment and contact Brighton leadership or human resources with any questions, concerns, or recommendations for improvement. The sections we will highlight are at-will employment, Brighton's harassment and discrimination-free policy, team member safety, professional conduct, attendance expectations, and performance reviews. First, at-will employment. This handbook is not a contract or guarantee of employment. Employment with Brighton is at will. That means you may leave employment at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. We do ask that if you do choose to leave Brighton's employ, that you give us customary 2 weeks notice or 4 weeks if in a leadership position. Brighton also reserves the right to terminate employment at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. That being said, Brighton's compassionate team members tend to remain with us and thrive because we find meaning in what we do. This tenure contributes to our mission and success. Now let's highlight harassment and discrimination-free workplace. Brighton is an equal employment opportunity employer. That means that qualified applicants and team members receive consideration regardless of any characteristic protected by federal, state, or local law. Brighton Hospice also provides reasonable accommodations for qualified individuals. If you need any accommodation, please contact your Brighton leader or human resources. We also recognize nursing mothers and want to accommodate needs. This policy applies to employment actions on every level. We strive to provide team members with a working environment free from intimidation, hostility, and other offensive conduct, and strictly prohibit harassment or discrimination of any kind by its team members, vendors, and customers. We do this by reinforcing a kind, respectful, and professional culture. If you have any concern, please contact your direct leader, administrator, or HR. We strive to handle all reports quickly and thoroughly. There will be no retaliation against a team member reporting or supporting a complaint or its subsequent investigation. Next, let's discuss safety. Team member safety and patient safety is paramount to Brighton's operations. Brighton has no tolerance policy for workplace violence. Team members are required to follow safety guidelines. This includes hand hygiene protocols, proper lifting techniques, infection control, hazardous waste disposal, and emergency plans, wearing appropriate PPE, and more. If you provide care for our patients in your role, you must also follow patient safety guidelines in addition to being mindful of your own safety. If an injury occurs while working, contact your leader or human resources unless it's an emergency, in which case call 911 immediately. On to professional team member conduct. The handbook lists many professional conduct expectations of team members. Once again, if a situation is not addressed, you are trusted to be professional, ethical, and use good judgment. Please take time to read this information thoroughly, but here are a few highlights. Professional communication. We have multiple communication systems, including email, phone, our Tiger Connect texting, and more. All communication should remain professional and avoid gossip and negativity. Brighton team members have access to sensitive patient health and other information and must follow HIPAA regulations. Protected information should only be communicated on a need-to-know basis. Also, do not take photos of any patient or patient's room for any reason. Do not display patient photos or identifying patient information on social media. Please refer to the handbook for additional guidelines. Time and attendance. Our work week is Sunday through Saturday. We are paid bi-weekly every other Friday for the prior 2 weeks worked. Hourly, also called non-exempt team members, must record and submit all time worked. Punctual attendance is crucial to excellent patient care and is required of all team members. We expect that you give your direct leader as much advance notice as possible of anticipated tardiness or absence, or if the need to leave early arises. This is ideally 24 hours before a shift starts, but at the very least 1 hour before a shift starts, when the tardy or absence is unexpected. Team members who are absent from work for 3 consecutive days without giving proper notice or communication will be considered as having voluntarily resigned their position. Please have all overtime pre-approved by your direct leader as soon as you see a need. Should you have a need for extended time off or a leave of absence, for example, if you need FMLA or estate leave, let your direct leader and human resources know. We believe in work-life balance, and because of this, we expect you to utilize your PTO during your time with Brighton. For this reason, under most circumstances, Brighton does not pay out PTO upon separation. Please contact your direct leader or HR for details on how this policy applies to your state laws. Dress code. Every team member represents Brighton in their role. You are responsible to be clean, neat, and well-groomed. This includes wearing our brightly colored scrubs and a badge for our clinical team. Our office team also wears a badge and dresses in business casual attire and casually on Fridays. Personal information. Every team member has a personnel record. It's your responsibility to keep your personal information, such as your address, phone, email, emergency contact information, all of that up to date. This can be done directly in Paycom, our HR system. Licenses and certifications. If your position requires a license or certification, it's your responsibility to keep it active. If it lapses, you will not be able to work until the license has been renewed. Relias training. Brighton prides itself on staying up to date on industry knowledge and guidelines. Every Brighton team member is required to complete online interactive trainings in our Relias training system. You are required to complete this training on time. Drug and alcohol abuse. You are expected to follow all federal, state, and local laws regarding drug and alcohol abuse. Do not come to work if you are intoxicated or impaired. As outlined in our handbook, Brighton reserves the right to drug test for reasonable suspicion, randomly, and post any workplace accident. Alrighty, performance reviews. To ensure we are upholding our mission and provide for personal and professional growth opportunities, you will receive performance reviews. Performance reviews are delivered at 90 days from hire or position change and annually. This is your time to discuss your performance with your leader as well as goals and aspirations. We want this to be a two-way conversation, meaning if you see room for improvement within your role or Brighton in general, please bring your solutions forward. We are constantly enhancing our processes and welcome your feedback. Finally, benefits. In addition to our empowered, compassionate culture, ideal patient caseloads, and potential for monthly team bonuses, team members are eligible to participate in our 401k plan and have access to our EAP at no cost. Team members who regularly work more than 30 hours a week are eligible for healthcare insurances and paid time off benefits. During your orientation, you will be invited to watch our HR benefit orientation to learn more about these benefits. If eligible, please be sure to take action in Paycom, whether that be to enroll or decline the offered benefits. I hope that these highlights have been helpful. Our leadership and human resources team is here to support you. Thank you for joining our Brighton team and for the value you will add to Brighton and its mission.